right, we are ready to start. I'm Jim Caswell. I'm with Normandy Partners. I am the Education Committee Chair and excited to be here today. As always, thanks to all the Education Committee sponsors. They're listed behind me, and we always, and it's critical, appreciate all the sponsorships related to ACBR. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker this morning. It's a great one, Kwame Johnson, the CEO, president of Big Brother, Big Sisters of Metro Atlanta. Today will be a blended story, one of real estate, one of reinvention. Kwame will talk about making the move from the headquarters location in Midtown to the emerging area of the Met, why this decision was made, and how the site was chosen. But as we all know, every great real estate story has an even better backstory. Kwame's background, which will rise to his position as CEO, is one of true inspiration, strength, and courage. In fact, it's such a phenomenal story. Kwame penned a book, The Hope Inside. And after he speaks to us this morning, we'll be giving away 4 autographed copies to 4 lucky individuals. So believe me, this is a must read. And if you haven't participated or signed up for the raffle, please do so to grab a copy. So without further ado, please welcome Kwame Johnson.
Well, good morning. Good morning. It is early. You all are early risers. I am too. Actually, my buddy Reggie came down to join me. We typically in the gym at this time of the day, but I'm glad to be here with you all to talk to you a little bit about Big Brothers and Big Sisters, my journey, but also ways that you all can get involved in the community. Thank you all for having me. Jody Selvey and Michael Lipton were representing us when we sold the building, which I'll get more into. And Jody connected me to this great organization, and look forward to doing more work with you all. So I thought I would talk about an issue that we're all thinking about. I spoke at the Alpharetta Rotary a couple weeks ago, and also the Johns Creek Rotary. And the topic of my conversation with them was about crime and violence in Atlanta, right? It's like the #1 thing we're all talking about, crime and violence. And I've worked on crime and violence my whole entire adult life. It's been my main focus, right? And I have some interesting solutions and thoughts on what we can do as a city and what I've seen work in other places that I worked in, right? So I wrote an article, an op-ed in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution a couple months ago. And the title was How to Solve Youth Violence Without More Cops, Cameras, and Curfews. How to solve violence without more cops, cameras, and curfews. Now, let me say this now, that I'm a big supporter of the cops. I'm not a defund the police guy, right? I do a lot of work with police. I actually just was meeting with the police department this past week. There's a big role for police to play. But too often cities that I've worked in, they go straight to more cops, cameras, and luckily we have not gotten to the curfews part yet. I worked in cities where they have to enforce curfews because things are out of control. So let's put this in perspective. So last year, let's just say roughly 100 murders, a lot of other crimes, but I'm gonna focus on murders. I'm gonna start dark and then I'm gonna get light, right? So bear with me. Most people don't talk about murders early in the morning. But this was going on in our city, right? It's a big problem. We're talking about it. Andre, a good friend of mine, has to deal with this, right? And he has a lot of good ideas and some things he's already done, which I support. So roughly 100 murders last year. I think about 120 to be exact. Chicago had over 500. You know, I worked in cities with 700, 800 murders, 900. You know, remember back in the day, New York City, you know, murder capital, DC, 900 murders in a year, right? So you got to put it in perspective, 100 murders. Got a few questions for you. Of those 100 people who murdered someone, how many of those people you think graduated from high school? Of 100. Any takers? 0. Of the people who got murdered, how many of them graduated from high school? 3. how many of the people who got murdered, I hope you're not recording this, the people that got murdered had a high school diploma, and only 3 did. So there's a direct correlation between education and crime and violence. How much does a murder cost? Any guesses? How much does a murder cost a city? More. $1 million. Investigation, prosecution, sentencing, most people who are on death row are there at least 10 years. So there's a cost to these issues, right? My budget is $4 million, and we serve 1,200 kids across Atlanta. 99% of the kids I serve never touch the criminal justice system. 95% graduate high school on time with a plan. So if you gave me that $100 million that we spent on murder in Atlanta, we can do a lot of different things, right? Makes you think. So let me give you a few examples of why I'm qualified to talk on this topic, right? The first example will be a police example, because I think some of you all think I don't like the police, and I'm going to start with that, right? So a guy named Steve Maynard. Actually, Ethan, you remind me, and you look like him quite a bit. He was my mentor, my first mentor. He was my track coach. He was also the hall monitor in my high school. He worked cafeteria duty, and he also was a police officer. And when I got in trouble at the age of 17, he stepped in to help me out. I was facing over 20 years in prison at the age of 17 for doing dumb stuff. Almost threw my whole life away, 20 years, 17, first time getting in trouble. Carrying a gun, selling drugs, the stuff you hear about on the news, that was me. All right? So I want you to think about that when you hear about the water boys. I'm gonna talk about them too. Because I was worse than the water boys. But I'm your speaker today. Me and Chris are part of Leadership Atlanta. My class is better, 2020. I've been to Harvard. Most of my are CEO in Atlanta. 40 under 40 twice. Any award you name it, I've gotten it in Atlanta. Not for me, for the young people I represent, to give them hope, right? So Steve Maynard said, Kwame, we're not gonna give up on you. He would literally bring me my schoolwork. I had to spend my whole senior year behind bars. I didn't do 20 years, I had to do a whole year, but my whole senior year behind bars. And Maynard would pick up my schoolwork and bring it to me. I would do it, he'd pick it up, bring it back, turn it in. He said, well, make sure you get out of high school. He said, you know what, we're probably gonna try to get you a track scholarship as well. But he was determined to defend my potential. We talk about that a lot at Big Brothers and Big Sisters, defending potential. All of us have had somebody defend our potential. You might not need as much defending as I did, but none of us got here without somebody helping us and mentoring us. And I want you to think about that as we move through this conversation. So I did my schoolwork. He would turn it in. I think the teachers felt bad for me, so they gave me a C, right? It's pretty hard to do calculus by yourself in a cell with no teacher. I had to figure it out. But the school said, well, we'll give you your schoolwork. It's up to you if you're gonna do it, right? So Maynard was a cop. He didn't run from me, he ran towards me. I wrote another op-ed in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution after George Floyd was murdered. And the title of that article was, You Don't Have to Fear Me. Even though I'm a black guy with a bald head, a couple muscles, you don't have to fear me. Maynard didn't fear me, he ran towards me. We need more of that in this country. At Big Brothers and Big Sisters, we bridge that divide and bring different types of people together from different backgrounds in a mentoring relationship. Another story, a kid named Anthony. And Anthony's the reason I do this work. Anthony I met in the hole. The hole, for you that don't know, is solitary confinement, 23 hours a day in a cell, 1 hour out, right? I was 17-year-olds in solitary confinement. I'm happy to share that in New York State, where I was house where I was living at the time, where I grew up, they no longer put minors in solitary confinement. That law got passed about 5 years ago, and I did a lot of work on that. Georgia still puts kids in solitary confinement. If I would have gotten in trouble in Georgia, I would not be your speaker today, because I would have been treated as an adult on a first-time offense, and I would have did at least 10 years in prison. And I wouldn't be serving 1,200 kids a year at Big Brothers and Big Sisters. These things matter. You got to educate yourself on these issues and not just look at what you see on the TV, right? So Anthony, I met him in the hole. Anthony was from a different side of town than I was from. So we were supposed to be enemies where I grew up in Syracuse, New York. I know we have some New Yorkers in the room. You all probably don't count Syracuse, but Syracuse counts. It's upstate, you know? You're probably from Brooklyn or the Bronx or something like that. You're Queens, you know, I know, I get it. Actually, in the 90s, when New York was the murder capital, Syracuse had more murders per capita than New York City. Syracuse has the highest density of poverty for minorities in the country. Detroit is number 2, Syracuse is number 1. Also has the most snow in the country. So you can see why I'm not living there anymore, right? So me and Anthony would talk through the cell, through the vents at night and get to know each other, right? And Anthony would leave, he would go out back to general population, get in a fight, come back 10 days in the hole. That was the consequence if you got in a fight. Got caught with anything, it's 10 days. And I saw guys come in and do 10 days in the hole who were normal people and would leave talking to themselves. I've seen grown men bark like dogs. I'm not talking about Q dogs. We have some Qs in them, I don't know. Next article I'm going to write, thinking about it, is going to be the sounds of solitary confinement. The sounds of solitary confinement, what you hear at night in that dark place. So I said, Anthony, why do you keep coming back here, man, right? And he said something to me that started me on this journey. He said, Kwame, your father comes to see you every week. I said, yeah, he does. He said, my father is in the next unit, and I met him here for the first time. Anthony was full of anger. So he would fight and get sent to solitary confinement. Fast forward, well, 3 years ago, I joined Big Brothers and Big Sisters to be the CEO, right? I joined the organization. I'm learning about all these kids we got on the waiting list. We got 500 kids on the waiting list right now. When I started, it was over 1,000. So I'm like, you know what? I got to be a big brother. I'm the CEO. Can't be asking folks to do it. I've been asking Reggie to do it for a year. He still hasn't done it yet. But I said, I'm going to be a mentor. And I get matched with a young man named Anthony. That's how God works, right? I still think about Anthony because there's so many young people like him out in this world, right? That we don't know the background story. We just see what happens on the news. Just imagine if you met your father in jail for the first time, what that would feel like. The third story is a guy named Shank. Shank was his name. I don't know his real name. And for those who don't know what a shank is, it's a weapon you use in jail. It's called a shank. You can make it out of different things. That was his name. He was a very violent guy. He was a blood. We were supposed to be enemies based on where we grew up, right? And I'm doing my schoolwork. If I get out, I can do day school, I can do night school, and I can still graduate high school on time with my class, which is unheard of because of Maynard and what he did and what my parents did for me. The last step was for me to take my SATs because to get an NCAA track scholarship at that time, you had to pass your SATs. How do I take my SATs? I'm in jail, right? With Shank and Anthony and 50 other young men that I think about all the time. So we set up this plan where I would apply for a furlough. A furlough is used in a lot of different ways. If you see people out cleaning up the roads who are in prison, they're on a furlough. Someone dies in your family, you go to the funeral, that's a furlough. You're allowed to leave for a designated amount of time. Where I was, within 2 months of your release, you could apply for a furlough and go home for 24 hours. Most people I knew, Shank and Anthony, they went home, partied for 24 hours, got drunk, got high, had a good time, came back and slept for 2 months and then got released. So I said, you know what? I want to use this furlough to go take my SATs, right? It's a great idea. So I go in front of the board, it's like kind of like a parole hearing, the warden and some other staff. And I said, you know what? I don't need 24 hours. I just need 6 hours. I just want to go to my high school and take the test. They denied it. So that was a threat to society. So that's interesting. I'm doing my schoolwork. I'm like the nerd of the jail, right? I'm doing my schoolwork, you know, I'm working in the kitchen, staying out of trouble, trying to keep Anthony out of trouble and mentor these guys. But you're not going to allow me to go take my SATs. Again, you got to learn about what's really going on and how these things work and how the criminal justice system really works. This is a true story. This is what happened to me. I go back to my cell, I'm disappointed, like, man, I'm doing my schoolwork, trying to do all the right things. I'm trying to get out, go to college, you know, get my life back on track, right? Now, reading the College Board book, which is who administers the SAT. And there's a section in there for disabled students. And if you're disabled, the SAT will administer the test on site for you, wherever you are. Well, they didn't know where I was, but at the time, P.O. Box, inmate number. So I applied underneath that disability. I said, I'm disabled, I can't make it to a test site. I didn't say anything else. And they agreed to administer the SATs, right? So comes test day, right? I've been studying, I got all these test books in my cell. And the day of the test, because the jail wasn't happy about this, right? Which is crazy. And my parents said, hey, if you all, they went to the warden and said, if you all get in the way of this, we're gonna go straight to the news. We're gonna embarrass you all on the front page of the paper. So the test day comes and they do a shakedown on my unit. It's the first time in the 7 months I was there, they ever did a shakedown. They come in, everyone has to leave their cells, they go into the rooms and they look for stuff. It's the first time they ever did this. They go into my cell, shake everything up, and they come out, one of the CEOs comes out with a cigarette. And like, this is yours, right? Is this yours? Because if I have a cigarette, what? I gotta go to hole for 10 days. Can't take my SATs, right? It's like, cigarette, if this is marijuana, maybe it's mine, but it's cigarette, come on, I don't know what I want a cigarette for. I'm like, super clean, because I already know this is a controversial thing. I want to take my SATs. This is what they tried to do. So, which is the hard part, but this is important. Shank came next door and took the blame for that cigarette. Went to the hole for 10 days. So I could take my SATs. And Shank is probably who you would see on TV, right? A throwaway. What I learned is that those young men believed in me when they didn't believe in themselves. It was very powerful. They believed in me, but they didn't believe in themselves. They believed that I had a shot. They believed that I was different than them. And I was no different than them. Yeah, I had both my parents in the household. That's important. But Shank took the risk of losing his mind, which we saw happen to multiple people going to the hole, so that I could take my SATs. And I became the first kid ever in the United States of America to do that. I made history of becoming the first person to ever do that. And now other kids can do that if they so have the need or in this unique situation that I was in. So I share that with you because that's Black History Month, right? That won't make the history books. I reached out to the SAT board and I said, hey, you guys, you should all do a story about this. They didn't want to touch it. They agreed that I was the first to ever do it, but they didn't want to touch the story, right? So those three stories are the reason why I do this work. They're the reason why when I did make it to Hampton University on a track scholarship, that my first year I decided to leave college and drop out and become a social entrepreneur and work on these issues of poverty, crime, and violence that all of our cities face. And I've traveled around the country trying to identify solutions. to some of these issues. The number one issue is poverty. It's not the water boys and it's not crime and violence. Those things come out of poverty. But we got to address the number one culprit, which is poverty. If you are born in poverty in Atlanta, you got a 10% chance to make it out. Isn't that crazy? In Atlanta? As great as Atlanta? I've never been to a city that has so many opportunities. I look around this room, I see people who look like me. In commercial real estate, like who would opportunities here? But if you're born here and raised here, you got a 10% chance to make it out. I want you to think about that as you travel this city and do deals. What do you know about that community? What do you know about poverty in that community? What impact can you have in that community? I'm gonna give you 3 simple solutions. I'm a C student, so I keep things very simple. One of my mentors told me once that A students go back to their alma mater and teach, and C students go back to their alma mater and endow. I'm not in the place to endow yet, but we'll see what happens with that. So 3 simple solutions to how to reduce violence and crime that don't involve more cops, cameras, and curfews. The first is removing barriers. Kids like Shank and Anthony are born into situations out of their control. They have food issues in front of them, housing, mental health, drugs, probably 10 barriers in front of them before they even leave the front door. And too often as adults, when we think about the problems, we think about adults who make bad decisions, who are using the system. I'm talking to you about kids. Over half of the crimes that are being committed are by youth in Atlanta. These are young people. These aren't adults. Too often when we think about poverty, we think about adults. And I don't like dealing with adults, to be honest with you. Adults are the problem. Whenever I meet with a school system, the problem is not the kids, it's the adults. School systems are employment agencies, not learning factories. The adults are the issues, not the kids. So we got to remove those barriers. We have an ecosystem of nonprofits in Atlanta that are trying to remove those barriers. What I'm trying to do is coordinate that a little bit better. Because you got food programs, you got housing, mental health, all these different programs exist, but too often we exist in silos. So what I've tried to do is bring leaders together. So when a family comes into Big Brothers and Big Sisters, I can connect them. I can not only give them a mentor, but I can analyze what the issue is and give them resources to remove those barriers. The first step has to be removing barriers. And I hear Andre talking about this, he gets this. But the headline too often is more cops, more cameras, and more curfews. Second thing is empowerment. I believe in teaching a man to fish. I'm not a big supporter of soup kitchens. I know why we need them. I would never work for one. But we got to empower people to show them that they can do it on their own. No one's going to do this for you. Life is not easy. You know, I don't believe in handouts. I believe in a hand up. I believe being on tap, but not on top. We got to empower people. And that's what mentors do every day in Big Brothers and Big Sisters. We empower young people. We show them how to do it. We mirror it for them. I was meeting with some pastors recently. They said, Kwame, why don't kids come to church? I'm like, man, it's pretty simple, right? Which they didn't want to hear. I said, kids don't want to come to church because they don't want to hear a sermon. They want to see one. Show me that it's possible. Show me that this hell I'm going through, there's a way to make it out. That's what kids want to, they want to see it. They need a living, tangible example. They need to see that it's possible. And that's what mentors do, especially boys. They need to see it to believe it, see it to achieve it. You got kids in Atlanta, south side, west side of Atlanta, who've never even been to the aquarium. Never been to the aquarium. They've never even seen it. They don't even know what's possible. The third, which is the most important, Because even if you don't have removing barriers, even if you don't have empowerment, the third, which I've seen the work day over day, is hope. And that's why the name of my book is The Hope Inside. I've seen so many young people push through the toughest situations because they were hopeful that their situation would change. The reality is, a lot of these young people are in families and communities that may not change. The West Side and South Atlanta have been like that for years. I'm still trying to figure out why. The home of Martin Luther King, like, how is this even possible? I'm still trying to figure that out. And that can't all be blamed on white folks. Can't, right? Because those murders I talked to you about, guess what most of those folks look like? 90%. They look like me. And the people who got murdered look like me. I can't blame that on white people. We got to figure out how to solve some of these issues. So hope is what I've seen work. I'll give you an example. Madison High School, South Dallas, probably one of the toughest schools I worked in. Madison High School had over 1,000 violent incidents a year. 1,000 violent incidents. They had no home football games, no home basketball games because of the violence. They had 10 cop cars parked outside during lunchtime, just in case something jumped off. This is Madison High School. These are schools that exist in America. And I met a guy named Anton Lucky, who was a former gang leader, started the Bloods in South Dallas, and he went to Madison High School. He explained to me his first day at Madison, he was being jumped by the Crips outside the school building. And the principal came out to his rescue, and they started jumping the principal. That was Madison High School. Anton Lucky went to prison for 10 years, and when he was in prison, he met a lot of young men coming in who had life sentences, teenagers, for putting it down for blood, like doing things for the gang. It made him change his life. He got out, we met, and we started doing work in Madison High School. And he recruited 7 other men and women with similar backgrounds to work at Madison High School. They actually recruited Anton Grover, who was who started the Crips in South Dallas. And within 1 year, through mentorship, through empowerment, through removing barriers in that school, and through hope, they went from 1,000 incidents to 50 in 1 year. They didn't bring in cops to the building. They didn't bring in all these other things. They went in and showed these young people a different way. So that's what my goal is to try to make mentorship a part of the fabric of Atlanta. I had a group of water boys in my office last night. We're doing work with the water boys. We have a program called the Young Entrepreneur Program. It's not called the Water Boy Program. It's called the Young Entrepreneur Program. Because these are entrepreneurs, these young men. And actually young women. There's water girls. Most people don't know that. There's water girls and water boys. The first session we had, I told them my story, of course. These young people had so many questions about the criminal justice system. They have no understanding of what it is and how it affects them and what the risks they're taking. They have no idea, these young people. They ask questions for hours about just the criminal justice system, which they're at risk of interacting with, and they have nothing, they know anything about it. Let me get to the Big Brothers and Big Sisters story. I know we're getting close on time. So I joined the organization close to 4 years now ago, and we were in Midtown, right on 16th and K. No, I'm thinking of my DC days. 16th and Peachtree. I lived in DC 15 years before I moved here. And I came to the office. I was like, man, it's a great building. We have like a mansion on the front of the building. And I don't know if you remember that. It's like a big mansion built in 1901. And then we had a building that was built on the back, I think in the 80s. And I'm like, man, this is great. It's 30,000 square foot building in Midtown. You got the scooters outside and restaurants. But I look around, I'm like, where are the families? Our families aren't here in Midtown, at least not anymore. And when we bought the building, I would say 7 years ago, it put us in a tough place We got building hungry. A lot of nonprofits get building hungry. We don't all need buildings. We need to focus more on service, not buildings, right? I wanted to get out of the building industry, but I learned quite a bit about commercial real estate through that process through my good friends, Jody and Michael at Colliers. So I said to the board, I said, you know what, guys, we can sell this building, reset our financials, and get into the community. And that's what we decided to do. We didn't know COVID would happen in the middle of a real estate deal. And I remember just talking to Jody and Michael, they would call and say, man, another 30-day delay, another 30-day delay. You know, it's like a nervous wreck. Are we ever gonna get this deal done? Our first 2 buyers dropped out. Another buyer tied up the property for a couple months. I knew nothing about all this due diligence and all this stuff, but they worked with us on it. And we identified the Met as our new home, which is Southwest Atlanta, right on the MARTA, free parking, a lot of makers, small businesses, nonprofits there. We thought this would be a great home. So we worked hard, and Graystar, who bought our building, stuck with us through all the challenges with the economy. And we sold the building, I think, for 8.4. We bought it for $4 million. So we made some money. And we got out of the building business and decided to rent. And we went from 30,000 square feet to 10,000 square feet. Because our work happens in the community. Like when you all get matched as a big, because that's my goal, is to match all of you all as bigs in our program with the 500 kids I have waiting. You meet with them on the weekends. You do things after hours. You go into their school. You don't come to our office. These things happen in the community, right? And this is something anybody can do. Anybody can be a big. Anybody can be a mentor. And it may not be the right time for you to now, or may not be the right time tomorrow, but you may know somebody who could be a big, right? I want you to think about what you're hearing on the news. I want you to think about, are you being a part of the solution? What are you doing to be a part of the solution? We all have an obligation to do something to give back. It doesn't have to be a big brother or big sister. It could be doing something else. But if you're not a part of the solution, then you what? Part of the problem. And we all have a responsibility. I think mentorship is the best way to change a community. One kid at a time. I think it's one of the best ways. It's not a silver bullet by any means. But I told you our results. 99% of our kids never touch the criminal justice system. 95% graduate high school on time with a plan. All I need is 1 year commitment from you. I need 12 hours a month. I'm not asking for new time because none of us have new time to create. I'm asking you to give me your existing time. Let a young person walk along life with you. Explore the city with you, learn about your business. They don't know about this. Go with you to the grocery store to learn about healthy eating and budgeting. All the things you already do. I do it, I'm a CEO, I'm busy. This is something that anybody can do. And most people don't know we have 500 kids on a waiting list, but now you know. Now you know about the waiting list. The question is what you're gonna do about it. I'll close with this. I've got up here and I've shared all my deepest, darkest secrets. Me and Lance were talking about this earlier. Your story is your superpower. Too often, we are not comfortable with sharing our stories. I cannot tell you how many people have come to me and said, you know what, Kwame, I went through this. It may not have been jail, it may have been something that we've all been through stuff. I've had people come to me and say, man, I was thinking about killing myself. Your story can be somebody's lifeline if you are confident enough to share it. Like, me telling my story could put me at risk, could hurt me with an opportunity, you name it. But I've decided to take these chances to help other young people see that they can do it, but also empower you to tell your story. Every award that I've gotten, every opportunity that I've gotten, I put my story in there. When I applied for Leadership Atlanta, I put my story in the application. Your story is what makes you unique and different. It's your superpower. Too often we hide from our story. And guess what? If you don't feel comfortable in your story, you can't be the best leader. You cannot be the best leader if you are not comfortable with who you are. And who you are is not your resume, because that's what you get most of the times. Oh, I went to this school, I did this, I've worked here. No, who are you? Who are you really? What's your story? I guarantee you would allow you to connect with your team better. I guarantee you will help you do more business deals, because we are in a relationship business. How are you going to build a relationship with somebody if you're not comfortable in telling your story? So I encourage you to get involved, whether it's with us or another organization, to be a part of the solution. And I encourage you to tell your story. And what I'll leave you with is that Atlanta, of any city, I think, has a chance to be an example for the rest of the country. Big business, small business, university, HBCUs, best fried chicken that I've ever had. And what's interesting about Atlanta is that most people aren't from here, right? But we adopt this thing called Southern hospitality. That growing up in the North, for me, I didn't know about it. You know, it was something you hear about, but it's a real thing. It's like when you go to Miami, you get off the plane, the humidity hits you in your face. You feel it. It's like it's something real that is there. And what's interesting about Southern hospitality is that us New Yorkers come here and we adopt to the Southern way. Because most people aren't from here, but we still maintain Southern hospitality. So that gives me hope that we can make mentorship a part of what we do in Atlanta. We can make that the Atlanta way. The term mentorship does not exist in Latin. That's pretty interesting. It's not a common term. They equate it to family. It's something they just do naturally. They don't need a word. So my ask to you all is that we make mentorship a part of what we do in Atlanta so that we don't even need the word. And if we do that, Atlanta could be an example for the rest of the country. Thank you.